mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life. We won't live in the past. We're making it last.
It's time for another conversation. Welcome to Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, with other people. And I'm Noreen Daly, and it's always a pleasure to just be able to meet people scattered all over the world. And this time around, we have Dr. John M. O'Brien. He's a psychologist, author, professional speaker, and also a coach. And we're going to be unpacking how can workers effectively manage incivility in their work environment. But before we get into that, John is going to tell us a little bit about his book. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much, Noreen, for having me, and I'm really pleased to be here on your podcast. So the book and the book title is quite a mouthful, as we were talking about earlier. Rudeness Rehab: Reclaiming Civility in the Workplace and Your Home Space. The purpose of the book is really threefold. It's to highlight for people what is this thing called incivility. How do we define that, and how much it really is more of a problem than people realize. Rudeness and incivility really can erode our health in ways that people don't realize. So it's building the case that it's a serious thing to pay attention to. And then it goes on in the parts 2 and 3 to teach people skills to manage rudeness and incivility internally, like self-coping skills that you can use. And then the third part starts to get into some interpersonal skills that people can use to manage interactions with others that start to take a turn towards rudeness.
What triggered or what made you decide to literally write a book about this?
I had been working with clients for now over 30 years, doing psychotherapy as a psychotherapist, teaching people skills to manage stress and to deal with symptoms that they were experiencing. But I had not had the chance to kind of take my message to the masses, so to speak, outside of the therapy room. And then I heard Dr. Christine Porath, who's kind of a leader in the field of incivility and its negative impacts. I heard her speak, and it was like a light bulb went off for me. And I had this idea of bringing together the coping skills and experiences of rudeness. And that was kind of an idea that was there. And then the pandemic hit. And at least in our country, people, at a time you thought people might come together, people became very divided and hostile towards each other. And then as that pandemic started to wane, I sort of thought, well, now surely we'll start to treat each other better, but it's like it's only gotten worse. And so that really is what prompted me to finally have the impetus to write the book.
Okay. So now we're going to get into unpacking it, but just to set a context, what is incivility? How do you then define that?
Yes. And I just would throw out, for interest's sake, that if you go into Amazon and you search for incivility, it autocorrects to invisibility, which I think is fascinating. So it's like even Amazon is overlooking incivility. So, but to your question, incivility is rude and inconsiderate behavior that creates stress in the target of the behavior, in people witnessing that behavior, and even boomeranging back towards the person who, her or himself, is being rude.
Okay. All right. So with that, how then can workers effectively manage incivility in their work environment? How?
Well, I would talk about it in two ways. First of all, in terms of managing it with coworkers, I think it's important to put someone's behavior in context and who the person is. If it's a coworker that you've known for a while and they're suddenly coming to you, or they're interacting with you in more of an inconsiderate or rude way on a particular day, well, maybe they're just having a bad day. And maybe therefore it's not worth addressing. But if it's something that is more of a chronic problem, then you decide, is this someone I can address this issue with? Do I have a good enough relationship that I can address it with them myself? Or maybe I try to, If that doesn't go well, then maybe I need to involve my manager in
Okay.
the discussion. Maybe if that doesn't work, then maybe involve HR. So I think there are a series of steps to
Mm,
go through to try to address the behavior professionally. If I also talk in the book about a number of skills people can use to
okay.
manage rudeness that they may be facing, and I summarize some of them with the acronym BAM, like BAM, like a superhero that you see in the comics. BAM,
Okay.
and that stands for breathing, active listening, and mindfulness. And I can unpack those if you'd like.
Yes. Yes. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I didn't want to just go see.
Oh,
Sometimes if you
no.
were a faculty member, you could just keep talking forever. So I like to be
I know,
polite,
but no.
Maureen.
Go right ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Hmm.
I want to make this a conversation. So breathing, using our ability to regulate ourselves with abdominal breathing, sort of, or what's called, yoga breathing or belly breathing to help us fill our lungs full of oxygen. There's also another variation that's called the stacked physiological sigh, which is a very powerful, quick breathing technique you can use to lower your tension. So, breathing is very important to help us ground ourselves so that we can be more thoughtful about what to do. So, that's the breathing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Active listening is what you are doing right now. Well done, which is nodding and saying, uh-huh, and sometimes if we are actively listening, we may say to people, how so, or what do you mean? When we reflect back to someone in that way, and ask them to say more, we're kind of holding up a mirror or getting them to think more about what they're saying. And so if someone has just said something rude and you say, how so? That means we're asking them to like think about what you just said and then determine can you say that differently or do you want to say that differently? Sometimes it gives a person a chance to rethink what they've just heard themselves say. But even if they double down on their rudeness, active listening gives you the chance as the listener to then think about how you're going to respond effectively and not just react. So that's the active listening part. And then finally, mindfulness, which is, I think, a term that sometimes is a little overused, but it's in essence self awareness and figuring out how can you manage yourself. And when you are faced with rudeness, especially if it's someone that you've been dealing with for a long time, and they have this difficult behavior, it's to figure out how can you be more strategic in how you respond. And there's a four-step mindfulness I talk about in my book, which is in essence stop and breathe, which I just kind of talked about, reflect on, okay, what is my urge to do, but what would be more effective, and then choose a more effective path. So that's a four-step quick mindfulness, but breathing, active listening, and mindfulness are helpful skills.
It's always so easy for us when we're in a workspace to say people are just so rude. But sometimes the ones we're being rude to our coworkers, we're gonna continue the conversation just after we take a break and get a word from our vans.
I was the person who the teacher would always call on to read aloud in class, and that traveled with me until whenever. But if you took away the paper, if you took away the book, I would freeze. I would die right on the spot. Let me introduce you to my 17, say 18-year-old self. Good with content if I'm to read. However, if I was to ever express my thoughts without writing them on paper, it was no good. Noreen was the one who recognized my flaw, but she didn't leave it there. She led me along the journey of developing my communication skills. She allowed me to know how to critically think on the spot, but not only that, how to arrange my thoughts logically so that I can come across as persuasive in my argument.
Langdo Language Institute was created to meet your language and communication needs. All of our packages were created just for you. We are passionate about language and dedicated to your success. We offer the CSEC English program, the Study Buddy program, the Get Ahead with English program, and the Business Communication program. Contact us at 767-285-0938 or email us at landolanguage@gmail.com, because the real question is, how can we help you?
You can't live your best life without a healthy immune system. Boost your immune system the delicious way with Zappy's organic juices and punches. Made from local produce with zero added sugar, our juices cleanse and revitalize your body as they boost your natural immunity. Try our delicious flavors: Beat It, Berry Bomb, Get Fresh, Ton Up, and Island Splash. Find us on Instagram at Zappy's Organics, or call or send a WhatsApp message at 1-876-779-8910 to order today. That's 1-876-779-8910. Zappy's Organic Juices and Punches. Live your best life today.
Welcome back. Let's continue the conversation. Said two, but before you get that, you'd approach in 2 weeks. Before you get on to the second one, this is if it is that you have somebody who is exhibiting this behavior, yes? What you just described. What if you are the person who is the rude person? How do you then become aware of that and then to fix that?
Aha, great question. Right. Well, and I think that's such an important point, because as I talk about this issue with people and give talks different places, people are saying, yes, rudeness and incivility are a problem, and everybody else is the problem, and everybody else needs to change, without recognizing that any of us, if we think about incivility as sometimes, unintentional behavior, but nonetheless problematic, then we have to be open to understanding that our behavior is coming across as rude. So part of it is being willing to be open to feedback.
Okay.
And sometimes that's difficult when someone confronts us about something. Initially, our reaction is, of course, to get defensive, protective of ourselves. But if we can keep ourselves from doing that, and again, active listening comes in. When someone says, I was really upset when you said whatever, rather than getting in defensive mode, to try to breathe and tell me what you mean, and try to proceed from a perspective of understanding and empathy, and listening to feedback and deciding how you might be able to change your behavior. So I think that it's about being open and learning about relationships that are important to you.
I'm glad you said that piece. Relationships are important, because if the relationship is not important, you're really not going to put in the work to fix it. All right. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So you said there was a second way that you would look at it. Go ahead with the second.
So there were actually two that I was mentioning in my answer. So one is more of the formal stepwise process through like human resources, whatever your boss.
Okay.
And then the second part is that skills of breathing, active listening, and mindfulness, which you can use in workplaces or home spaces, or in the grocery store, or wherever it is that you might be confronting rude behavior in others.
Okay. How effective have you, over time, have you seen this technique work? Let me ask it another way. In other words, do you think it's for specific work environments, or this is something that can transcend whichever industry, whichever workspace, or do you think that you add another step based on the industry?
Very good question, I think. I think that, and I'm open to feedback as I think about this with people, but I think that the skills I teach people really do transcend workplaces.
Okay.
Obviously, some work environments probably have more rudeness than others. I'm thinking right now in the United States about our healthcare environment,
Okay.
where there's a high level of stress, people are understaffed, and I hear a lot of times from clients, and even myself, I was having blood work this morning and went to my doctor's office, and people are tense, and those environments seem to have more rudeness right now. In customer service environments, dealing with the public, there's a lot of, you're confronting people all the time, some of whom are not in good mood. So certain, environments are likely to have more rudeness. I think the skills apply broadly.
If of all the steps, though, you think that, okay, if for all that I've said, ladies and gentlemen, here is the one technique I say is the one you must get. What would that technique
Hmm. I'd put my money on breathing
be? Why?
because I think nothing else is really going to be effective if we have not centered ourselves. And we have to be grounded and centered ourselves to be able to proceed effectively with anything else. So I see breathing as most foundational in terms of any skills of regulating ourselves and dealing with people interpersonally. I think it starts with ourselves and being able to calm ourselves so that we can respond and not react.
There's some people, though, that in their minds, when they think, okay, for me to center myself, you're telling me to engage in yoga or in some of those other, Eastern things that I'm not open to. What's your reaction to that?
Well, this goes right along with when I talk with clients about this idea of using breathing to manage their reactions in relationships. They will, in fact, start laughing at me like, oh, that's a great idea, John. So I'm in the middle of a conflict with my boss, and I'm going to say, hang on a minute, I need to go do some breathing and I'll be back. And like, that's just not reality. It's true. But what I say to people is this does not have to be, yeah, that you have to become some yogi or some,
Okay.
really expert in breathing, but we all have lungs. And it's not like we're going to go somewhere and be like, oh, shoot, I forgot my lungs. Like they're always with us and we're breathing anyway. And so doesn't it make sense to try to breathe and just pay attention to breathing more effectively so that you're not actually making the situation worse? Because if we get tense and we are breathing shallowly, we're making the situation worse. So when people scoff and roll their eyes at me, which they do, about breathing, I say, that's okay, but I think it's important to try. And for the most part, people become convinced once they try it.
Have you tried your own techniques? Final question.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, of course. I mean, I have to, practice what I preach. And just to make it clear that, sometimes people who are experts in something want to sort of send a message that, and I'm always on top of my game. I'm never, in this case, rude myself. And that's not the case. I mean, I really work at this, Noreen, but I have to be open to feedback as well. So I practice the skills and I try to practice the awareness, but the big secret is that I'm human too. And I sometimes fall short. And so it's just to say that we all do, and it's just important to try to pick yourselves up and start again.
Excellent note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing, John.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for having me.
This was Make It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. I'm really telling.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for